Good afternoon, Facebook viewers. My name is Tom Loewy, and it is Monday, and coming up on 12:30, halfway through the traditional lunch hour. For those fortunate enough to be working first shift, you are driving with Loewy, and you are just looking at an empty lakeside pool, the splash zone over at Lakeside. We're going to get to the reasons why the pool is closed 2 weeks early this year. Actually, kind of like 5 swim dates, technically. Traditionally closes on Labor Day. It closed last weekend was its last go-round, so it closed pretty early. We're going to get to that. First, we're going to talk a little bit about Senator John McCain. He died. Obviously, I think most people know that. It's heavy in the news cycle, as it should be, and it's heavy. It's attracted its share of controversy because of, what may or may not be the president's personal feelings about John McCain. We know that there was animus between the two of them. There's a lot of whenever somebody dies, I remember when Strom Thurmond died, and I was just like, give me a break already. I mean, this guy was like pretty much an unrepentant, hypocritical racist. That's not John McCain, obviously. Unlike Thurmond, I don't reject a lot of the hagiography around his death. I mean, there's a lot of good and important things to say about John McCain. I think there's a lot in his life, his career as a senator, that can be held up to scrutiny. I just want to say this, and that's my source of conflict was knowing what he went through in Vietnam, knowing what he suffered, and the long-term effects that has on, knowing a little bit about the long-term effects that it has on both prisoners of war and their families. I thought that he had a humanity a lot of people wouldn't have. At the same time, I really wondered about some of his, voting against, a lot of times, against gay rights, and voting in support of wars, sending other people's kids to go and fight in wars, often left me perplexed, sometimes angry with John McCain. I felt like when he took Palin on as a running mate, and that he really sold out on a lot of his values at that time to become a presidential candidate. And again, so I have a lot of conflicted feeling about him. I think he somehow survived the worst of our foreign policy. He felt the brunt of that. The war in Vietnam was, in many ways, so wasteful for this country, and so wasteful for the young men and women at the time. So I try to keep that in mind today. I try to remember a man who survived something that I can't even imagine, and I know I never could. And the courage that took, and the courage that it took to live in the world after that. He made decisions that I might not have agreed with, but he made them, and he made them from a perspective far different from mine. So while I can be critical of those decisions, think critically about those decisions, I recognize the fact that unlike a lot of politicians on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, who today send kids to war, he actually went to war, and and spent a war being tortured and being imprisoned, and going through something that none of us could ever understand. So his death should be recognized. His life should be recognized. It shouldn't be uncritically recognized, but it should be noted and strongly noted for both his sacrifice and then his continued attempts to serve long after I think a lot of other people would have curled up and gone away. So that's what I have to say about John McCain. If you have a different opinion, by all means let me know. You are driving with Loewy. It is roughly 12:30, right? Half past noon, right? And the driving on Henderson Street is, as usual, dicey. Second thing we want to talk about, I'm writing a column for tomorrow. A lot of people this weekend contacted me on Facebook, were upset. I also, to be perfectly honest with you, was upset. I had two kids with me this weekend, the kid I know and his buddy, and they were bound and determined to swim on Sunday. And so we went out to Lakeside on Sunday, and it was closed. And come to find out, it's been closed since like August 21st or something. At any rate, very disappointing. A lot of people were upset. And then, so I'm like, okay, guys, we'll just go to Hawthorne, you know, we'll swim indoors. And they were all down for that. And then we went to Hawthorne, and that wasn't open either. And so that was a big disappointment. Then we went to the YMCA, where I paid $50 a month in family membership, and went there, and the pool was closed there also. So there was no swimming in Galesburg this weekend unless you had a pool of your own. That was a bummer. But so what am I writing about? I'm trying to tell people beyond our anger and our frustration why those pools are closed. And to that end, I talked to Tony Aligny Estill. And if you don't know him, if you don't know Tony, he's the parks director, and I highly recommend that you find a time to sit down or stand up, whatever, pull him aside and talk to him. Because I'll tell you something, he's candid, he takes responsibilities for stuff, and he lays it out. He lays out the park district's challenge in ways that, you know, it's really interesting, and he's informed. Listen, he cares about bringing services, especially to kids. Like the dude, you know, found out about the skate park over in Kiwanis Park. He figured out a way to help make it so that it got fixed. Now, a lot of it was fixed with volunteer help, but he helped make that happen along with the city. Okay, the city gets a lot of credit for that too. And next year we're going to have, hopefully, you know, if he can get some cooperation and get things settled away, we're going to have an expanded splash zone. There's going to be at least one more water slide attraction, and you know, it's going to be nicer for folks. So why was the so I guess what I'm trying to say is, sorry, I'm also driving obviously, but what I'm trying to say is that Tony is really open. He really listens to people. He really cares about the parks, as all the employees over there. Elizabeth Varner obviously did before she retired. I mean, it's not like, you know, somebody sitting back and you know, twirling their mustache and figuring out, you know, what can I do to make Galesburg taxpayers unhappy and you know, screw them over. It's not the goal. So the splash zone, the Lakeside, you know, water park, closed early this year for budgetary reasons. And it's basically a move. Get this, it costs roughly $500 a day just in lifeguards, just to pay the lifeguards to have the splash zone open. And let me tell you something, they really got to have lifeguards. You know, you've got one on top of the slide, one on the bottom. You've got at least two, sometimes three on really crowded days in the zero gravity, in the kiddie pool, and then you've got two, sometimes three on crowded days in the 5-foot pool where adults and the older kids swim. So it's no small undertaking, and those kids, they do a really good job, and they're very attentive. And if you take the time to get to know them, you know, they take those jobs very seriously. There have been rescues there as recently as last year. And so you can't not have lifeguards at a public pool. You just can't do it. So it's $500 a day, and here's the bottom line. By closing a little bit early, they saved $2,500, $2,500. And, you know, when you're trying to pull off a budget, when you're trying to do things to actually save money, these are some of the sacrifices that you make. And what it comes down to is days do get sacrificed. Swim days do get sacrificed in the end. He told me a couple other interesting things I'm going to bring out in my column, is that attendance really drops off after July 4th for whatever reason, and I'm not sure what it is. Here's what they found. One aspect is that when it's really super hot, ironically, people don't go to the pool. And any digit, any number, any temperature that starts with the digit 7, people rarely go to the pool, which I also found weird, because some of the best swimming, like, you can stay longer, swim a lot more, and it's really refreshing when it's like 77, 78 degrees. But, you know, the sweet spot is in the mid 80s. You know, that's maybe a little breeze. That's tolerable for people. You start getting into the 90s and not as many people come out to the pool, which is really weird, but that's the way it goes. So hopefully that answers some of the questions about Lakeside Pool, why it was closed this weekend and why they've closed early. And we're probably looking at a situation where that's going to be the norm. That's going to be the new normal. The Labor Day thing is kind of like with schools out the window. I mean, I didn't put this down on the title, but one of the things that pops to mind is like, you're not going to keep public pools open when kids are in school already. You know, I mean, kids went back, you know, last week. Some kids went back the week before, or late the week before. For a lot of kids, their first full week of school was last week. For some kids in other districts, their first full week of school was actually 2 weeks ago. I mean, we're already one game into the high school football season, which is just amazing to me. I mean, so the idea of Labor Day being like the end of summer is crazy. It's like August 1st is the new Labor Day in a lot of ways, because then you're like school shopping and you're getting ready and you're winding down. Like, you're winding down your summer. So anyway, the other thing that I talked to Tony about was, when Lakeside's closed, Hawthorne's supposed to be open and available to the public. And that's where I was a little upset, was that there wasn't a public alternative. And you know what? Being the guy he said it was my fault. I overlooked the scheduling, and he took full responsibility for it. And I'll tell you what, you can be mad or you can be thankful that you have a parks director who stands up and takes responsibility for what is going to be, in the scope of the world, a minor mistake. Let's understand, like, so we don't get into the public pools until like about September 4th. You know, there are worse calamities. If you really need the exercise, I need the exercise, right? Like, I need to get in the pool. Well, then it behooves me to walk, you know, or find some alternative. For people who can't walk, hopefully you can find some other alternative. But, you know, that's the way it goes. It's just going to be a little bit of a wait for the Hawthorne pool. And again, part of it is scheduling. It's hard to get, you know, the lifeguards are primarily teens and late teens. So you're talking about kids that are in high school, and you're talking about kids that are in college. And so the kids that are in college are gone, you know, most of them. And then the kids in high school, they're starting up the school year. A lot of them are in other kinds of sports, have other kinds of activities. So Hawthorne Pool will be open on or around September 4th, I think is what it is. Ironically enough, September 4th is the reopening date of the YMCA pool. They, you know, perfect timing all around, right? The pool's closed, and then the Y pool has been closed for cleaning and refilling, which needs to be done. I mean, let's be honest here. You don't want to swim in like a dirty pool, right? So that's what's going on at the Y. They're gonna reopen, ironically enough, around September 4th. So the swim season starts again in the first week in September for people who care. Last thing we're going to talk about, Robert Conley, the I guess crime reporter, for the lack of a better term. He's the cops and courts reporter. I guess that's the traditional title. And let me tell you, he's the courts reporter extraordinaire. No one, and we've had a lot of good cops reporters and courts reporters through this joint here at the Register Mail. Nobody has ever done a better job drawing the threads of cases together to tell you about what it means when guns are stolen, or what it means when drugs are found, or adding perspective to arrests and sentencing. He knows about the criminals in this town, and he knows about the sentencing, and he knows about the crimes, and it's really amazing the level, the depth at which he knows. We both share a passion for crime fiction and true crime, what used to be called true crime, and we share a passion for True Detective, which was a show that premiered on HBO. It must have been about 3 or 4 years ago now, unfortunately. The first season featured famously Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson, and was an incredible story. It was 8 episodes, and maybe, I'm not sure about that, maybe 6. But at any rate, if you ever get a chance to watch True Detective, especially the first season, was amazing. The second season was really good. The problem was like, you have this amazing debut show with amazing performances by McConaughey and Farrell, and Woody Harrelson. And I mean, it was just hard to follow up. The second season featured Colin Farrell and Vince Vaughn, and it was really good. It was really good. It was really interesting. It was more of an urban story. It was more of a political story. It didn't quite draw the viewership, but Robert Conley sent me the news last night, and also Jackson White, our sports reporter, kind of at the same time. There's going to be a 3rd season of True Detective, and it looks really compelling from the kind of the trailer that I saw from it. It looks amazing, and I'm really excited about that. I'm going to have to find a way to get HBO again for 3 or 4 months, figure out how to do that streaming wise. But the thing I wanted to say about True Detective was, and I've talked about this before, we live kind of in the golden age of television, television as novellas and television as filmed novels, and the depth and breadth that can be put into stories. You can go deep, you can go wide, you can really flesh out characters, you can carry characters from season to season more logically now, and you don't have to have resolution at the end of every half hour, 45 minutes, or 55 minutes, whatever the show format is. It's just an amazing age. And what I wonder for people, has television watching and television programming and the ability to binge watch TV shows like True Detective, or I don't know, whatever it is you like, you can sit down and watch 3, 4, you can watch an entire season if you want, right? Like, sit on your couch and do that. Is that something, has it eclipsed movie going? Because what I've noticed is I love movies, and I always will love movies, but I don't spend a lot of time in movie theaters. I went, it's kind of like date. It's kind of just, for me, it's kind of just for dates, and it's kind of like a last option on dates. I went to 3 Billboards, which was amazing. The Frances McDormand, Sam Rockwell film. That was an amazing film. And then I went on a date to the Mr. Rogers movie, Won't You Be My Neighbor, which was an amazing movie also. And I had other than the fact that the theater was 110 degrees, but I mean, but do you really go to the movies anymore? And if you still watch movies, has television eclipsed film? Because I'm wondering about that a lot, just in my own viewership, my own interest, my own level of what I watch. I find myself watching a lot of more classic films that I can stream or that I watch on my own Blu-ray DVD collection, or I watch television shows. And obviously, like Netflix and Hulu are all about television shows. The movie selection on those two streaming channels is kind of ridiculous. Jackson White, sports writer, was over last night. We traditionally kind of watch Sunday night baseball together, and we flip over when the game gets boring and we watch a movie. And so last night we went to Hulu, and I mean, the movies were ridiculous. They were so bad. And then we found a movie called The Iceman, which was a biography of a hitman named Richard Kuklinski. I'm totally pronouncing that right. He was a New York-based hitman who worked for Roy DeMeo, who was loose. I think he was part of the Gambino family, and I think he might have been dead by the time like Paul Castellano took over in the late 70s, or he was pretty close to dead. I'm not sure how far Roy DeMeo made it in the New York underworld, but Roy DeMeo ran a kind of a kill crew for the mob, and he had non-mob guys, Irishmen, and Kuklinski, who was, I think, a Polish guy. They did a lot of the murders that the DeMeo crew eventually got credit for, at any rate, and got sent up for as part of conspiracy, part of conspiracy packages from the Justice Department. At any rate, so The Iceman's a good movie that you can find on Hulu. It's good. It was Michael Shannon, and that's the reason why we watched it. Michael Shannon's a very fine actor, and if you get a chance, you can definitely watch that on Hulu at least. At any rate, tell me what you think of True Detective if you watch it, if you're looking forward to season 3. What we've talked about today, we talked a little bit about John McCain and trying to reconcile the politician that he was, in my mind, who I often disagreed with the tremendous sacrifice that he made both as a soldier and trying to be a public servant, whether I disagreed with him or not. Here's a guy who served his country and spent time as a prisoner of war, a long time as a prisoner of war in Vietnam, tortured, mistreated, came home, and instead of retreating from life, which I think a lot of people rightfully would do, he chose a life of public service and did that, I think, to the best of his ability. So we talked about that. We talked about why Galesburg public pools are closed. It's a budgetary issue, and I hope you caught that, and I hope you get a chance to meet Tony Oligny Estill. It's a hard name. It's harder than Loewy. So his name's Tony Oligny Estill. It's a hyphenated. He's the director of Parks and Recreation for the city of Galesburg, and he's a very fine director. And he's very open, and he's very public, and he wants to hear your input. So just know that. And then we talked a little bit about the 3rd season of True Detective. It's coming in January, so hopefully I can maintain my excitement level. Thank you for joining me on this Monday rambling driving with Loewy. This is what happens when you don't get your coffee before 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I have been rolling around, getting stuff done, getting stories put together, getting my column for tomorrow. I finally got to you guys, and I realized, wow, I'm going to be cloudy because I've not had that caffeine. So hopefully you have, and hopefully you have a great rest of the day. We're going to talk at you tomorrow. I'm hoping to have a guest, and I'm hoping to do a drive where you can listen to somebody else. But thanks for listening to me today. I appreciate your time. Have a great afternoon.